In the small village of Highton Brook, the villagers had decided to travel south to avoid the harsh winter that was coming their way. After a less than fruitful harvest, it only made sense for them to seek warmer weather for the coming months. However, despite the risks, one villager by the name of Jebediah decided to stay and test his luck. As the villagers set out on their trek, Jebediah spent the next few weeks trying to gather as much food and hunt anything he could in the forest. But aside from a few berries and squirrels, there wasn't much. Eventually, the weather started to turn for the worse, and before he knew it, winter had arrived. The days and nights grew bitterly cold and dark as the snow fell with a fury. The winds also whipped against Jebediah's log cabin like waves against a boat in the ocean. For the next couple months, Jebediah knew that he was going to have to tough it out inside the cabin. Day and night, he made sure to keep the fire in the fireplace going. He sat next to it on his favorite chair while he wrapped himself with as many blankets as he could. He carefully rationed the food he had, knowing it had to last for months. Most of his time was spent sitting in front of the fireplace as he ate a bowl of stew that he cooked from a pot over the fireplace. While this helped give him comfort on most days, even then, the bitter cold would still sometimes find its way to chill him to the bone. For some odd reason, this winter felt different than the ones before it. Regardless, Jebediah was still able to manage. At least for now, Jebediah was quickly realizing that his ration of food was most likely not going to last. But he figured that was a problem for another day. As long as he could stay warm and safe, it might be okay. However, one lonely night, as Jebediah sat in front of the fireplace reading a book, he would suddenly hear something odd. Jebediah tried to listen closely to figure out what it was, but he would hear nothing but the wind howling outside. As he returned to his book, suddenly, Jebediah would hear what would sound like a scream, a woman's scream. Jebediah sprung up from his chair in total shock. Who could possibly be out there in this storm? Jebediah asked himself. He lit a lantern as he made his way to the door. His first attempt to unlock and open the door was a failure. The cold had almost sealed it against the frame. But with a determined push, Jebediah was able to budge the door open. As he did, however, he was met with the unforgiving cold and wind from the blizzard. After a few seconds of shock from the storm, Jebediah began to survey the outside, trying to illuminate the landscape as much as possible with his lantern. But aside from the storm and snow on the ground, there was not much to see in the darkness. "Is somebody out there?" Jebediah would scream. Nothing. For a second, Jebediah felt relieved, thinking the scream was nothing but the wind, and his imagination had just gotten the better of him. But suddenly, a woman's voice was heard. "Help me!" The woman's voice would scream. "Help me!" Panic would fill Jebediah's soul as he wondered who it could possibly be and how they were able to trek through this weather. "I'm coming!" Jebediah would scream. "I'm coming!" Jebediah would do his best to navigate through the snow, but it was almost up to his waist in some parts, and at the same time he was still having trouble spotting anything in the dark. "Help me!" The woman's voice would scream again. "Help me!" Jebediah was just about to trek further out into the snow when he suddenly had a chilling realization. The voice he had been hearing sounded exactly like Mabel's voice, one of the villagers who lived with her husband and kids in a cabin a few miles away. But she, like the others, had left before the storm had come. "Mabel, what are you doing here?" Jebediah yelled in confusion. "Where are Lucas and the others?" Silence. After a few moments, Jebediah was just about to ask again, but he would only be met with the same response as before. "Help me!" A woman's voice would once again scream. "Help me!" Jebediah made his way further out into the snow as he continued to assess where Mabel could possibly be in the dark. Jebediah yelled, "Walked far, walked long." The woman's voice replied back before screaming, "Help me!" again. Jebediah stopped in his tracks. A feeling of dread suddenly washed over him. Something was wrong. Jebediah knew that Mabel couldn't possibly have walked. For you see, Mabel had lost her legs years ago due to an illness. "Mabel, where are Lucas and the others?" Jebediah asked desperately again. But he would hear nothing but a few moments of silence before once again hearing a woman's voice scream, "Help me! Help me!" Jebediah began to slowly and carefully walk back to the cabin. He had no idea what was going on or who was calling out for help from within the dark. But he knew it couldn't possibly be Mabel. He could feel his heart pounding and his breath getting shallower as he tried his best to journey back to the cabin. But he would once again hear a woman's voice scream out, "Help me! Help me!" Even though Jebediah was almost overwhelmed with fear, he ignored the voice as he continued to inch closer and closer back to the cabin's front door, trying to not let whatever was out there know what he was up to. Once again, a woman's voice from within the dark screamed out, "Help me! Help!" But before the voice would finish that sentence, Jebediah would suddenly hear a blood-curdling scream, and no more than a second later, Jebediah would hear thunderous footsteps running through the snow. To his horror, Jebediah would suddenly see the silhouette of something tall and large making its way towards him. Because it was dark, Jebediah couldn't really see what it truly was. But for what he was able to make out, it had a long, lanky body that was covered in fur and a large skull-like head with massive horns on top. Jebediah was almost frozen in fear as he beheld the ungodly sight in front of him. But after getting his wits about him, he quickly threw the lantern at the oncoming figure. Flames quickly swarmed the unknown creature's body as the lantern broke upon its torso on impact, causing it to scream out like an animal. Jebediah wasted no time retreating into the cabin and locking the door. Jebediah tried his best to fight off the feeling of pure shock and terror that his body was riddled with. He ran to the fireplace mantel and retrieved his musket off the rack. Just as he began to load, he would hear a voice by the door. "Please help me," the voice would say. "I don't want to die." The voice sounded just like one of the Dunstan kids from across the village, but Jebediah knew better. "Be gone, demon!" Jebediah would yell as he continued to load his musket. In an instant, whatever was on the other side of the door suddenly began to charge against and claw against, while unleashing a bone-chilling animalistic roar. Jebediah prepared himself, aiming at the door just in case something were to burst through. But before he knew it, the banging would stop. Jebediah listened carefully as something began to make its way to the top of the cabin. Its heavy footsteps would cause dirt to fall off from the ceiling. As the unknown creature seemingly stopped moving, Jebediah would be inundated with something truly horrific. Suddenly, he would hear some familiar voices. "Help me! Oh my God! No, please don't! Lord, save us!" What? "Run! Run!" The voices from outside were coming from every direction. Jebediah realized what they were. He didn't know how it was doing it, but whatever this creature was, it was able to mimic the voices of his fellow villagers. And what made the situation even more horrifying is that Jebediah knew that these sounds were the last things some of his fellow villagers must have said before their untimely demise at the hand of this creature. As the heartbreaking pleas of help and screams of agony continued to echo around him, Jebediah dropped his musket and broke down. He fell to his knees in front of his fireplace as tears streamed down his face. He began wrapping as many blankets around himself to give him some comfort. Moments would pass when eventually the creature would break through one of the shuttered windows. As the creature entered the cabin, it would see Jebediah sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace. As it unleashed a loud roar, the creature would quickly swipe at him with one of its massive claws. However, to its surprise, the creature would quickly realize it had swiped at nothing but a pile of blankets propped up by musket. Without hesitation, Jebediah would jump down from a beam on the ceiling, striking the creature on its neck with his axe. The creature screamed in pain as it swatted Jebediah away. After falling to the ground, Jebediah quickly got back to his feet. With the creature momentarily trying to get its bearing, Jebediah wasted no time. With the axe still in his grasp, Jebediah runs towards the creature. He swings his axe right at it as the creature roars and raises its claws. Months later, as winter finally dies down, the trees start to turn green and the flowers start to return. A small group of travelers on horses make their way to Jebediah's cabin. When they walk towards the front, they notice the large claw marks on the door. They knock on the door with concern. Jebediah, it's the Smiths. We're traveling to the west, but we just wanted to check up on you. Come on in. A man's voice would respond from within. As the Smith walked in, to their delight, they would be met with the sight of Jebediah sitting in front of his fireplace, tending to a pot. Above him, however, mounted on the wall, was the large horned skull of some unknown creature. But before the Smiths could inquire about it, Jebediah would ask them, "It's a good thing you guys came when you did. You're just in time for supper," Jebediah said as he tended to something cooking in the pot over his fireplace.